AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us on the show. We've got a very interesting discussion to get into today. As most of you probably know, Gary Vasilash, my co-host, is out gallivanting somewhere around the world right now on vacation. We also have Sandy Munro who's going to join us, but he called me earlier just before the show started to say he's stuck in construction-related traffic. He'll show up in another 15 minutes or so. But we've got Joe White from High Speed Rodeo. We'll get into explaining that in a second. We've also got Sandy Bahruah, the head of the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. I say head, you're CEO, right?
Apparently so. No one else will be.
No one else wanted the job, right?
Yeah. So, High Speed Rodeo.
High Speed Rodeo on Substack, and also Thule of Sino Auto Insights, who I think's been on the show
many
before.
times.
Thule and I have started a podcast called At the Wheel. And we are spooling that up. I think we're now out of soft launch and into launch. You can find that on YouTube. You can find that on Substack. And then I write every week High Speed Rodeo on Substack.
Yeah, cool. Good stuff. I highly recommend reading and listening to it. So, but let's get into the topic. We have a headline for today's show is, Detroit, how is it going to be able to survive depending so heavily on legacy automakers? And Sandy Bahruah, you talk to so many companies in town. They're part of the Detroit Regional Chamber. What are you hearing? I mean, what is the feedback that you're getting of what's going on in the Detroit industry? And I say Detroit, but let me preface this because, look, we've got listeners, viewers from 50 different countries around the world. So any problems we're talking about in Detroit vis-a-vis the auto industry pretty much apply to any region of the world that is dependent on legacy automakers. But back to my question, what are you hearing?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. So, we represent the region and the state. And when you look at it at a state level, the automotive/mobility industry for the state of Michigan is $350 billion. It is 27% of our employment, and it's roughly the same percentage of the R&D that takes place in Michigan. It is huge. And, I don't want to make a statement about, the current administration's trade and tariff policies, but whatever's happening at the national level, where the direction of this administration is going, has a disproportionate impact on capital-intensive manufacturing industries, which obviously is prominent in Michigan. It's our biggest thing. Also, trade tensions. We're literally spitting distance within the Canadian border. Canada is our closest trade partner. It's our closest social partner. It's actually much faster to get to downtown Windsor than it is for me to get to downtown Ann Arbor. And the trade tensions are really adding up. So it is a really scary time right now. And industry is, I don't want to say they're paralyzed, but they couldn't be more cautious right now because it's hard to make long-term CapEx decisions in an environment when you don't know what's going to happen next week, next month, or certainly in the next administration.
Sandy, I'm curious. I'm just curious. Are you aware of companies that maybe were looking at investing or expanding in the state of Michigan, adding something new, whatever, that have basically hit the pause button or the stop button on that, and regardless of what they told you as to why, but I mean, are you seeing that? Because it's certainly true that manufacturing employment nationwide is basically flatlined.
It's down 44,000.
Yeah, it's down a little.
Beginning of the year.
Yeah,
it's down
right.
44,000.
But anyway, back to my original question. I mean, are you seeing
Yes.
things that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Joe, the answer is yes. We have seen nationally, but also, right here in our own backyard in Detroit and Michigan, companies that were kind of on the move, looking to either expand or relocate either an R&D center, a headquarters, a manufacturing facility, kind of say, whoa, we're going to wait. And I know what you guys are also seeing is I mean, we are seeing, and let's give credit where credit is due, we are seeing a return, or at least plans for return for manufacturing in North America, and particularly America, but 99% of that is utilization of excess capacity. Right? Because there's excess capacity in the automotive industry globally.
So what you're saying, they're not building new plants. They're just filling up plants they've got.
Absolutely, right. And you look, obviously, we're seeing a big shift in EVs, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but, GM's, Spring Hill facility and their Factory Zero facility, they basically killed or about to kill their second shifts, because Lord knows what's going to happen at the end of this month when the EV tax credit expires, because everyone's literally lined up at their dealerships right now.
I will say that we all know what's going to happen. There's going to be, and we can get into this, John, if you want. But
go.
But yeah, there's absolutely going to. I mean, they don't take the shift off because they've looked into their order pipeline and seen it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, right.
They took the shift off because they looked in the order pipeline and they saw,
said, WTF,
parachutes out, WTF.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and we can talk later, I suppose, about whether that's a permanent situation but it's certainly going to be the next 6 months.
Yeah,
something like that.
Well, I mean, everyone, and actually our family, Lisa and I just picked up another EV, just kind of, part of the rush, before the end of the month. So everyone is pulling these purchases or leases forward. And I imagine starting October 1, you're going
to see a big slowdown.
You might get a deal on an Optic or a Blazer EV, but that's because GM will try to incentivize the heck out of them, to move them.
Yeah. And we can get into this later in the show, but go back to what you were saying, Sandy, that, everything that's going on right now, trade policy, tariffs, and things like that, are putting the Detroit automakers at a disadvantage.
Yeah. I mean, so, first of all, and again, your viewers know this, you guys certainly know this, even the most American-made car has 35% foreign content in it, right? So, and since these tariffs were introduced, the domestic automakers, just our traditional big three or Detroit three, whatever you want to call them, have paid $12 billion in tariffs, right? And so that either goes to corporate bottom line, reductions in employee profit sharing checks, or is adding cost to the consumer. There's no other place for that to go. It's a little bit like water in a house, right? It's got to go someplace. There's only a handful of places that's going to go. So that is basically $12 billion of U.S. innovation stranded capital that has kind of walked out the door, not even to consider the opportunity cost that's been paid. Think of the billions of dollars that Ford and GM in particular invested in EVs, right? That they now can't, is going to sit on the shelf, right? And who knows how that's going to get resolved. Then you have, just the cost involved in redoing your supply chains. And there's a reason why those supply chain guys and gals, make a lot of money, because it is the most complex industry on the planet. And again, when you have these capital intensive industries where, it is a 3 to 6 year runway before you can get a new product off the line and engineered and produced and approved and yada, 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 there's no wonder that we're going to see a slowdown in innovation in the automotive industry, just because the money's not there and companies don't know how and where to invest. You're already seeing it now, a huge slowdown in new model nameplates coming out, right? It just, Ford in particular, right, has really kind of said, well, we'll do new versions of this, that, or the other thing. And obviously you're going to see very few new EVs,
right?
over the next 24 months, right?
Right.
So Sandy, and I don't want to make this too abstract, but I'll try. I mean, I think I heard some time ago that in Michigan, R&D and the technical and R&D aspect of the auto industry is as big or bigger the source of employment in the state as the production
and much more valuable.
Well, right, and higher value all across the board, wages and all that. So that's one, and I wonder how worried you are, and I call this the Havana syndrome, that because of the United, sort of the step back from pushing electric vehicles and sort of incentivizing new technology, because of that, and sort of like, yes, it's fine to keep selling internal combustion vehicles that are kind of based on technology that's been around for 100 years. That the state could, people in the state could wake up in 5 to 10 years, and Michigan's kind of status as one of the innovation hubs in the auto industry globally, that's not going to be there. The Michigan will be the place where people are still doing combustion engines for an ever shrinking market.
You could give my speeches for me.
Right.
I'll be at the bar.
You might regret that.
I'll be at the bar. I mean, we look so much alike, Joe. No, seriously, you're saying exactly what we're saying. Myself and my colleague Glenn Stevens, who runs our automotive unit, it's called Mich Auto. What we're super concerned about is that obviously the automotive industry is global, right? It's the most technologically complex, advanced industry, certainly that consumers utilize, but also probably just the most complex industry out there in total, right? If we are the last market standing selling 2-liter turbocharged ICE engines, to everybody here locally, locally within North America, and the rest of the world has moved on, then our industry is going to get less and less global. We're already struggling with that already, right? And yes, we're going to see, this flatlining of EV demand, because the first adopters already have their EVs. They're going to hang on to them a little bit longer. But both E&Y and Bank of America, John Murphy, who just left Bank of America, are all predicting pretty significant spikes after about 2027, 28, for even just North American EV demand. Because, it's not about, for those of us who have both ICE engines and EVs, saving the planet's nice and all, but it's just a better driving experience.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what you've been saying.
Look, I'm a hardcore enthusiast, right?
Yeah.
I grew up building engines and rebuilding them, and I'm a pure enthusiast. I race cars and everything. I love the sound of a good internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, driving an EV is a better driving experience. Everyone talks about, all that great torque. Yeah, it's not even so much that, because for everyday drivers, they don't care about 0 to 60 times sub 3 seconds, right? Yeah. What they want to do is drive down the road, the highway. If they see an opening in traffic, what they want to do is just pull right in.
Yeah.
Not mash it down, have the engine rev up, the transmission kick down, make all this noise and get in. It's like, no, boom, you're right in there. And you get that one pedal driving.
Yeah.
And, we got Sandy Munro is in the house.
Hey, Sandy,
all right. Sandy, put your mic on and
get ready.
And get ready, right.
Stop this fooling around.
Right. But I'm just explaining why I think EVs are a better driving experience. A lot of people love that one pedal drive, and
oh, absolutely.
You'd
never get me. Well, let me rephrase that. If it's a race car or if it's a classic or something like that, I'll drive ICE. And by the way, I'm an engine engineer.
I know.
That was my job. Anyhow, at the end of the day, I couldn't dream of the performance characteristics you can get out of an EV versus anything that pumps gas.
Right.
And quite frankly, I'm also a cheapskate. For the price of 3 gallons of gas, I can fill up my electric car.
Yeah.
Hard for me to ever
at home. Never go to a gas station.
And I don't even have to go to a gas station and meet, strange new people.
Sometimes that's fun, Sandy. Come on, don't be so antisocial.
That's
well,
right.
Actually, if it's exactly. Well, I go to.
Can I just throw on this and then maybe switch, but. Another thing that I've been thinking about, and I've been sort of reading everybody's kind of discussion about this whole question of like, what's going to happen to the EV market, post September 30. And I've been wondering, so it does seem to me, Sandy, you're a good example. I think everybody.
Now we got to be careful. There's 2 Sandys here.
Right. Well,
that's
Sandy. Well, actually,
maybe
maybe
on
both.
the same page, or
an
anti-Sandy.
I think we even have the same birthday, April. right? Was
No,
that right? No.
January 19th.
Oh, there was
Yeah.
something else we had.
Well,
I'm April.
I'll depersonalize the point and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
I do think that especially as the vehicle market as a whole, because of the price increases that have apparently proven pretty sticky, is becoming more and more of an affluent Americans, and at least in this country, an affluent person's market. And I think a lot of affluent people who are going to have, okay, fine, I do a road trip 3 times a year, or I pull a trailer 3 times a year, where I got to have the combustion pickup until further notice.
Sure.
Fine. For everything else, I'm going to have an EV for all the reasons that you all have just said. I mean, the driving experience better, technology, the infotainment, all the technology is better, all that stuff, the electronics. And I do think that to bet that won't happen is a bad bet.
Right. And
Yeah,
then
exactly.
and we're just going to get further behind in this
Oh, yeah.
market. So, the EV market, by the end of the decade globally is going to easily be 20%, right? Well, 20% is the market for full-size pickups in North America, right? And, who in their right mind would walk away from a market like that? And again, I think, we need to be careful here. We're not saying, I don't think anyone here is saying that EVs are right for everybody, right? They're not, right? I mean, it is exactly what you're describing, Joe. Middle class and above households, single family housing, ability to charge at home, that's absolutely key. And you have 2 or more cars, right? And so you have the Suburban and you have the Mach-E next to it, right? It's easy breezy, right? And then once people, and I think there's going to be 2 avenues that are going to get us to this spike that B of A and E&Y and others are looking at in terms of EV demand start going beyond 2027, and that is again, affluent people who go for the EV, because once you start driving an EV, you very, very rarely go back. I mean, I know of one person personally that did that, and that was only because she couldn't find the EV that she wanted. It was taking too long for it to arrive. And then, but with the terrible resale value of EVs, they're great used cars.
They're cheap.
They're cheap. I mean, you can get a Mercedes E-Class EQS for like 32 grand that has 30,000 miles on it. You're going to see a lot of people get into EVs that way, and they'll get hooked. And I think that eventually will start to stabilize the resale values of EVs. It's probably 5, 6, 7 years away.
I haven't seen EQSs that cheap, but I have seen them at $40,000 for 30,000 miles, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But
it's basically half off. After 2.5, 3 years.
Right. So Sandy Bahruah, going back to what we started about, is how do regions that rely so heavily on the legacy industry deal with all the changes that are going on? What's your RX? What's your, what am I trying to say? Your prescription. What do legacy regions need to start looking at?
Well, it's trite to say, diversification, but it is, diversification is part of it, but you have to diversify off of your base, right? I mean, this is what, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, right? And it started out as timber country. Then they became aerospace, right? Particularly Boeing. But people forget that, the first airplanes were built out of wood. Right. There was actually kind of a competitive thing. And then the aerospace industry, Boeing, led to what's now known as Silicon Forest, right? All the tech that's out there, right? And so you have to diversify off your base. And ours is mobility. It's the technology and it's the skills around moving people and goods from point A to point B cheaply, safely, and efficiently. Right? That is a core skill for us. And so much of that is software, right? And, and actually Sandy and I talked about this a few months ago when I was visiting him in his office. It is very much an and strategy. We have to keep our manufacturing base. We have to have the skilled trades to be able to fill those jobs, to, get people interested in those jobs. But, we have to have, more of our citizens going into some sort of post-secondary education. I don't care if where you go, but you need both, right? You can't just do one. We can't build our future on just telling kids you got to go to college. That's not going to work, right? My son didn't go to college. I wish my son would have done what Sandy wants more of, is gone into skilled trades.
Yeah.
But you need both, right?
But so Sandy, here's my question, because you and I have talked about this, the need to diversify. But I love what Sandy Bahruah is saying, is you got to build off your base. How does a region like Detroit, but I'm saying there's other regions in the world that rely so heavily on legacy automakers, face the very same issues. But back to the question, what do you diversify from the base we've got?
Okay, diversification for me, well, there's got to be two things. I'd like to address the education diversification first. You heard about 400 and 300 odd people being rounded up by ICE?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, these are the Koreans that you're talking about working down south.
Well,
why?
Just to further, because I've been reading about this, and because they were here, they were technical people who were doing things that at least the companies said could not be done by available U.S. citizens. That's what they said. And there's a whole thing. We have a whole other show about that, but that was the reason.
So
they didn't have the skills.
Yeah, I've been phoning around to find out. And you know what? When the Chinese wanted to get into the battery business, they brought over tens of thousands of Americans that knew what they were doing.
And said, go to work.
And said, here, show us how to do it.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of these statements that these guys have put out was, oh, well, we're coming here. I've got a 6 month or a 6 week or whatever, 3 month visa and blah, blah, blah. I get everything going and I'll train them on how to make them work. I'm telling you what, we are losing every day good people every day because we are not putting them in where they need to be. There's so there's one education system, I call it the I system. I thought of it. I like it. I'm good at it. I'm the teacher. You get what I want. Mm-hmm. But really, we have a 40, 40, 20 kind of a system or kind of a population. The I part on the first arm of education, if you look at it as a U, guess what? That's the guys that like the I system. They're good at it. They're great spellers.
You mean like the traditional academic system?
Personal academics, I'm talking about K through the end, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
K through 9, all sitting there saying, oh yeah, I like that. That's only 40% of the population. Over here, you've got people who are basically good with their hands. And like I was, how'd I get into high school? I bluffed my way in because I never got out of grade school. You know why? Because I was a shitty speller and still am. But you know what? The guy that was the smartest guy in the class, Gary Porter, yeah, he used to say all the time, oh, Sandy's so stupid. That was on spelling bee day because I was the first one out. But at the end of the day, I got spell check on my computer, and he lives literally in a shack. And I know that because he lives real close to where my wife lives, and she didn't do real well either, my ex-wife. At the end of the day, you've got 40% of the people who really excel at this part of the U, and you got another 40% that are totally ignored, and then you've got 20% on the bottom that you're never it's going to be what it's going to be for them. But really, we have got to start looking at this is not the only answer. The I answer, oh, I think it's wonderful. That isn't working. And if we don't get back into technical high schools, we're going to have a real shit show. Now, we talked about automotive. I'm talking about the defense group as well. This right here, this is the arsenal of democracy. And you don't see it, you don't hear it, but the redesign of the bullets right here, 6.8, the redesign of all of the armament that we're supposed to be getting into it, right here. New ships, where are they going to come up with new ideas? Right here. That's where we need to really start focusing our attention.
So, Sandy, what you're saying is there's a lot of work being done right here. If we get the education done right, we're going to be able to feed the workforce that can diversify so that we're not so reliant on a legacy industry.
Right. So I just got my Automotive News magazine. Okay. And it says 90 years of the union and whatnot. And so some people had a lot of problems with the union, not me. Why? Because I had a journeyman's card. And when I was working at Ford as an engineer, first day in, I buy 6 or 8 boxes of donuts, slap that down, pass around my Toolmakers journeyman's card, pass that around. Let's be friends. Look, I need to get the job done. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need your help. Is that going to work? Sure. I didn't stay up in the office, and suddenly I went from a 6 to almost a 13. At the end of the day, when you've got that kind of skill set or that kind of talent, you're in a club.
So let me ask you both the Sandys this question. So, I mean, and as a journalist, I've heard people, say, Sandy, actually what both of you have said about the education system and the disconnect between the education system and the needs of the industry and the needs of the workplace, and kind of what the economy ought to be like. And, how do we fix that? Because, so China has fixed it by having a super top-down, extremely state-planned approach, which, at least from this distance, looks like it's working, although I'm not pretty darn sure I wouldn't want to live in China. But how do you do it? How do you do it here? And I guess, Sandy Bahruah, I'll start with you, but I'm just sort of curious, like how do we know what you both have defined the problem, but I wonder what you think would work as a way to actually kind of make the connections that aren't being made today.
So we're trying to work on that right now. And, we're doing, trying to do like focus groups and polling, because what we have in Michigan is a little bit of a cultural challenge, right? It's actually not so much of a policy challenge. I'm going to get back to what Sandy's talking about in terms of how education is delivered. That's a whole different topic. I think it's a really valid topic. But regardless how education is delivered, and we need to focus on what is the output. What are we getting for our education dollars, for those of us who pay taxes, right? The other thing is, how do you change the culture where, in Michigan, like we were talking earlier, John, about your early days, on the factory floor, right? It was practically nirvana, right? I mean, it was hard work, but you could graduate from high school, walk into a Chrysler plant, walk into a Ford plant, get a good job, take care of your family. If your kid wanted to go to school, there was money to do that. Now, those traditional factory jobs don't pay at the same level that they did, in the 1950s and 60s, right?
Relative to cost of living.
Yeah, exactly right. So, you're not taking one of those jobs and sending your kid to school or getting a vacation cottage, in a lake up north, right? That they're priced out of that kind of market. So, but those jobs do exist, right? But, it takes skills. So how do you get Michiganders to think differently that, hey, the automotive, manufacturing, mobility industry is just as exciting today, if not more exciting today. It's solving the world's problems. It's allowing people to, get from point A to point B, to go to work, go to school, go to dinner, go shopping. It's basically for them to spend money and make money. Right? I mean, talk about a huge, valuable service. You can be part of that industry, and it's so exciting. It's so technologically advanced. But unlike your grandfather, you just can't have a high school degree. So we're calling it K through 12 plus 2. We don't care what the 2 is. Is it 2 years of community college? Is it 2 years of skilled training? Is it 2 years in the military? I mean, it is something beyond high school. So you got to change that culture.
You got to change high school. That's what you got to change. The I guys that go to a normal collegiate high school, good. Theirs all set. If you're technical, you got squat. Nothing. I started in grade 9, at WD Low Technical School. You remember that school, Cast Tech?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, whatever happened? Anyhow, at the end of the day,
Still doing well, actually.
I'm telling you right now, if there's 40% want to go to some sort of a collegiate, there's another 40% that don't. They don't spell. They don't get along. They find everything boring. They don't want to read the next great novel. They'd rather build a birdhouse, and they'll do a great job. The I guys, no birdhouses. They don't want anything. These guys, all day long, anything to work with their hands. And we have totally demoralized those types of people because, oh no, you don't want to touch poop. I mean, if you're a plumber, you'll be touching poop. You don't, and I can tell you for sure about this because I've given a bunch of speeches at a bunch of big organizations where it's teachers, some teachers, mostly it's principals, people who are in charge of school districts and whatnot. Man, when I get done with them, it's a spanking that they can't forget. And quite frankly, at the battery show, I was talking to Jim Farley about some stuff, and he is also very unhappy about the way the school system is going and this degrading, oh, well, you're a tradesman. That's never going to work. But I'll tell you what, I don't want to monopolize too much of this, and I don't want to kill my little speech that I'm going to be doing at the battery show. But a kid came to my house. I don't want to do any more plumbing. Kid came to my house because we had a leak in a sump pump system. And I can't remember his first name. I'm not going to give his name out anyway because I got to get permission. But anyways, this kid comes in. He's 24 years old. He's a plumber. He's a licensed plumber. And that's and I said, how long you been working at this? This is, I guess, my fifth year as a plumber. Oh, give me a little, how did you get that? Well, I was failing in high school, and my girlfriend, now my wife, she helped me out. But the real big boon for me was my uncle was a plumber, couldn't find anybody that wanted to be a plumber, and I went to work for him. And in 4 years, I was a plumber, and now I have a house, 2 motorcycles, and 2 cars. Geez. On my speech, you're going to see what I did because my dad pulled me out of working on a farm, which is crap. Pulled me out of the farm. I was 18 for 3 years in a row working at a factory for my journeyman's cars. So I was an apprentice. 19, I got my ticket. 22, and I'm driving a Morgan Super Sport. All my friends that were in the I type of world, yeah, well, I'm going to college. What did you get? Man, I'll tell you what, look at the real statistics. And by the way, I learned a new term, milking the morons. That is what they call secondary or tertiary, I guess now it'd be, so you got grade school, you got high school, and now you're going to,
I just want to throw one thing in there too, which is, and maybe this is more of a marketing comment about manufacturing. One of the things, and again, I know you both know this, but I'll just put it out there. One of the things that's been striking to me over the last several years is, you walk into a factory, like I 2 years ago, I did a tour of Kentucky Truck as they were launching the Super Duty.
Yeah.
The new generation Super Duty. And, make a long story short, among the things that I saw there, they were talking about how they're applying AI to the quality control and manufacturing processes. Hold that thought. Throughout the auto industry, especially with because of electric vehicles, but I think because of any vehicle, you have this whole material sciences aspect to the auto industry, which is super important, super critical, and every other day, right? We're hearing about rare earth minerals and all these critical materials that there's not enough skills in the United States, not enough capacity in the United States. We're beholden to China, and so it just seems like it's not just. I mean, I agree, mobility and transportation is a big part of the equation, but the auto industry also brings in all these other things. I mean, what's good is AI? Well, you can apply it to a complex manufacturing environment. That's one of the things that it's good for. And if you know how to do that, you get your fancy car. I mean, it seems like that's the kind of thing that doesn't really get explained.
Hold on one second. We got to take a break here. We
Gotta
got to
pay some
close up
bills.
this segment. We got to give a shout out to our great sponsor, Bridgestone.
Performance that shines, even in the rain. That's what really matters. Bridgestone Potenza tires, improved grip in wet conditions.
All right, we're back. We're talking all things automotive. Let's get into news of the week kind of stuff, because that's one of the favorite parts of the show.
One more thing.
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah.
We get everything from China. Okay, so I'm not going to get into any political thing, but putting up tariffs and stuff like that is forcing people to buy from this part of the world. That's the other reason we need high schools that are technical. I don't want to go back to school for 2 more years. By the way, the other thing I just found out, when are you the smartest in your whole life? What age?
Probably
When
young.
is your brain at the
We're
most?
most able to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in your teens and
Teens.
20s, early
Nope.
20s.
7.
1 month after you're born. 1 month.
That explains a lot.
Everything's-
So we've all peaked.
Yeah.
We peaked a
peaked.
long
We're
time
done.
ago.
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing is 13. 13 is a magic age. If you don't have skill sets that you need for the rest of your life by your 13th
Yeah, no,
birthday, or
excellent
whatever.
point. Excellent point.
So where do I want to have tradesmen made?
Right.
Where do I want to have anybody that wants to be technical?
Or give, and I know you want to move on, but I'll just
Yeah.
say this one thing, because or give kids a sense of what the options are and what the possibilities are. Because I know I have a pretty vivid memory of when I was 13. I had no idea what to do with my life other than what I saw before me, which was that my dad, he was a writer and a newspaper guy, and which is what I turned out to be, because that's what was modeled for me. And I have no complaints. It worked fine for me. But if you don't kind of know, like, what are the avenues I could pursue?
It's kind of what I'm talking. It's, you got to give people, especially young people, a vision for what the future is, right? And how they have a role in it. That they don't have to go to college. I mean, but there is a pathway for them to live a great life in an interesting career in an interesting industry, and do well, right? Because let's face it, Michigan lags when it comes to both educational attainment and per capita income. As recently as the early 1980s, Michigan was considered not quite in the top 10 of wealthy states, but pretty darn close, like in the top dozen. We are now in the bottom dozen in terms of per capita income. And if you look at where per capita income is, it's all based on skills.
Yeah. No, excellent point. But like I said, I do want to get into some of the news. And Joe, I want to get into something that you've been reporting on or commenting on, writing about in High Speed Rodeo, your Substack.
Right.
Do you call it station, Substack?
Oh, it's a
outlet?
newsletter.
Newsletter. There you go.
That's how I'm trying to do it.
Okay, so this week, the IAA, the auto show in Munich, Germany, all the headlines coming out of it. I mean, the Chinese are dominating that show.
Yeah,
What do
they
you
crashed
read
the
into?
party. So I didn't go. I wish I had.
Me too.
Did you go? Okay, fine. So we both have that handicap, or we all have that handicap. But yes, I mean, I read a lot about it to write about it in my High Speed Rodeo newsletter. And yeah, I mean, basically the Chinese brands crashed the party. They basically said, not only do we have all these new models with all this fancy tech, but we're going to invest in R&D. We're going to invest in production, localized production, localized R&D. BYD, I think it was BYD, was talking about they're going to build their dealer network to like 300 and beyond, and some of the other brands the same way. And the German brands brought out, from what I could tell, were some pretty decent looking new vehicles. I mean, the Neue Class, the iX3, which is the new generation BMW electric vehicle, huge roll of the dice for them. As a friend of mine said, it was remarkably unugly.
Which is an improvement for BMW.
And I'll tell you why,
Double
because
ugly, yeah.
they shrunk the grill.
Yeah. So they didn't do the silly things. And Mercedes has a new generation of the electric GLC, which, from what I can tell, I Yeah, it looks
Yeah,
really
it looks
nice.
really
Looks
good.
like it has kind of all the bells and whistles and their new technology operating system. That's good. But I would say that a lot of that was a reaction to the pressure being put on them by the Chinese. And the last thing that I'll call out is obviously a lot, but my former colleagues at Reuters did a pretty cool story with the headline, "The Party's Over." And this was Oliver Bloom, who's at least for the moment, check your watch, the CEO of both Volkswagen Group and Porsche. And I don't know how long that's going to last because, he was basically saying, yeah, I mean, Porsche is getting hammered in China, which used to be one of their biggest and most important markets. They're getting slaughtered there because their technology and their cars aren't where they need to be. The industry in Volkswagen Group, the industry, they're under this huge pressure from the Chinese. They're coming in. Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of angst kind of maybe not under the surface, on the surface. The thing that's supposed to be, the sort of semi or biannual or annual, party showing just how wonderful the Germans are. And so, yeah, it was a really interesting event. And I guess good news is auto shows are back, at least in Munich.
At least in Munich.
Yeah. Well, if you want to go look at Chinese cars, they're back.
Right. And so, I just think it's interesting, and I kind of want to hear what you both have to say about this. But I look at that event and kind of the way it played as a glimpse into the future for North America. Because, and I've said this on your show, and I'll keep saying it, eventually maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I just think that if anyone in this market thinks that the Chinese companies are never, ever going to figure out a way to localize production and get over or under the wall, I just feel like that's wrong. And
what you have to do is you have to look backwards. So I'm old, real old. And I remember, those, I'm not going to use the terms, but these
right.
nasty terms we don't use anymore.
Yeah.
They'll never get into the market, Japanese, right?
Right. That's okay.
And
Say
I
that.
remember watching the first cars come into the Detroit Auto Show. They had, I don't know, about an area as big as your studio here. Virtually nothing. And then people started to drive them. And one thing leads to another, and they're inexpensive, and they last forever, and they're squeakers when it comes to gasoline. I mean, on and on and on. So GM's got, in those days, GM had about 50% of the market share. Now they got 14, Toyota's got 14. Where's it going to be with BYD? Because I'm telling you what, okay, Trump is doing the best he can to fend off these invaders as quickly as he can. But I guarantee you, he's a businessman. This is all done for one reason. Just like Toyota came in and Honda came in, and then later Hyundai and Kia came in, and all the other guys came in and built their cars here. We're going to see BYD, Geely, and everybody you can imagine is going to eventually come here.
Yeah.
And everybody will have a part, but it ain't going to be 60 or 50% anymore. It's going to be in the low teens.
Yeah, we already have Chinese cars on American streets, right? There's a Buick, there's a Lincoln, there's Polestars,
Volvos,
right? They're already here. The other thing that's going to happen, or the two other things that are going to happen, very much to Sandy's point, the governor of Mississippi, the governor of Alabama, whatever, you pick the state, right? They get an offer to do exactly what Sandy's talking about, right? Hey, we're going to build a $30 million plant. We're going to employ all of your, citizens. Here's the investment that we're going to make. Governor's going to say, okay, fine. We're going to do that. And then, all of us travel and our friends travel. The number of people that, because they know I'm a car guy, right? They'll say, hey, we were in Europe and we rented a whatever. And it was the most beautiful thing we've ever driven. And, they'll send me videos. I mean, how easy the tech connectivity was, how intuitive it was, the lines. I mean, these Chinese cars have become gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some ugly ones like the Dolphin and things like that sell for $14,000. But, the ones that are kind of mainstream are really, really well done.
Joe, another thing that broke this week, Mexico is now talking about putting 50% tariffs on Chinese cars. And what do you read into that?
Well-
And you, before the show started, you made a very astute observation of who it's going to affect.
Well, yeah, and again, so apparently under pressure from Washington, from the White House, Mexico said, okay, we're going to put 50% tariff on imported Chinese car and vehicles, and also I think parts and other stuff. And my first thought was, wait a minute, aren't the Detroit Three like significant importers to Mexico of Chinese cars? And you're both nodding because you all know the answer. The answer is yes. I looked this up on Google. If it's wrong, mea culpa, but apparently 65% of the Chevys that are sold in Mexico now are Chevys made in China, or if not China, South Korea. And so I mean, I looked at a couple of things. One is it's another effort to kind of put a finger in the dike, right? Stop them, and I think somebody was quoting the story that I read about this, stop the Chinese from using Mexico as a backdoor to get into the North American market. Okay, good luck. But second, it seems like the short-term impact of this is going to be yet another blow to the Detroit Three, and yet another bite out of the profit margins that are already taking a pounding from tariffs. And I just sort of wonder, I mean, kind of back to the beginning of this conversation, I wonder, kind of what that is going to do to the capital that's available for investment in jobs in the United States, capital that's available for investment in innovation. I don't know. That was what I thought. It was like, seems like it looks great from a headline. Oh, keep BYD out, Mexico. It's going to hurt the domestic brands.
I mean, let's face it. The last time this country 100 years ago played with tariffs, everyone, we all know the term, Smoot-Hawley. Actually, one of those representatives came from my home state of Oregon, lost in the next election. But actually, everyone did. Hoover lost, Smoot lost, Hawley lost, right? It started out as protection for farmers. That's how the Smoot-Hawley tariffs kind of were birthed. Then it became kind of an all things, every other industry. And Henry Ford himself said, this is a really, really bad idea. And you see Jim Farley kind of echoing that now. He's kind of channeling Henry Ford, saying that, yeah, this is, Mary Barra at GM has been a little bit more nuanced.
Well, she didn't want to get in Trump's crosshairs again. She already caught that on the Lordstown
term
last time.
Yeah, she learned her lesson, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
but and it does seem. And again, I mean, let's see what it
backfires.
And inflation numbers came out today, and they're not catastrophic.
No.
But the direction of inflation is up again. Up, and up's bad. Okay, it's not 8%.
Look, I'll make a prediction.
And the job numbers are bad.
And the job numbers are.
It's going to get worse because so far the Detroit Three. It's not just them. Most automakers have not passed on the cost of tariffs.
Not just automakers, everybody, all businesses are eating costs right now. But this because, one, no particular company in any particular industry wants to be the first to say, I'm bumping prices 13% or whatever it's going to take to cover that, because they don't know what their competitors are going to do. The other thing is that, I mean, it is such a uncertain market for a policy market, right? We don't know what's 15% today could be 40% tomorrow, right? So everyone is just kind of sitting there taking their lumps for as long as they can, eating as many costs as they can, to kind of protect their market share until they absolutely can't.
But I don't think they can hold much longer. Look, Ford Motor Company lost money last quarter.
Yeah.
General Motors, what they claim? They had to pay out $1 billion or
they
whatever.
said it's going to cost them $5 billion
for the year, right?
Yeah, Anderson Economic Group put out a study, I think, first on LinkedIn, but now I saw there was an official study today. And they reckon that the automakers, I think it's all of them, not just the Detroit Three, but automakers serving the U.S. market in July, 1 month, paid $1.4 billion.
It's $12 billion total since the tariffs started.
Right. And as you said, yeah. And I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting to see whether the reckoning and sort of the party's over, can't fake it anymore statements come in the third quarter calls or the fourth quarter calls. But I'd bet a 20 it's one or the other of those two where they say, okay, part, we can't do this anymore.
Well,
we have to adjust.
So we're deep into the third quarter right now, right? And sales are up. Sales are up. Why? Because pricing's pretty good right now, relatively speaking.
So maybe I should have more courage and say, I believe after the end of the fourth quarter, after we see the payback,
right? Because
across
look,
the board.
But people are, and it's not just EVs. People are pulling ahead purchases, not just for vehicles, but for appliances, things that are expensive. That if the tariff pricing starts to bubble through to the consumer, right? People are smart. They know what's going on. They want to get ahead of that. So how much of kind of the sales holding up well? How much is that just advanced purchases that have been pulled forward? Because what I fear is, okay, tariffs going to add costs, that's going to reduce demand. You have all of these purchases that have been pulled ahead, which is going to reduce future demand. So I think you're right, Joe. I think those fourth quarter calls are not going to be fun.
I'm gonna. This is not I'm not a financial guy. However, I did read The Art of the Deal. This is right out of his book. Mm-hmm. All he's doing is he's beating everybody up. He won't get what he wants. He's going to give a lot of stuff up. He's going to walk away from a lot of things, including tariffs. But at least he's caught everybody's attention. And that's all he's looking for. I'm telling you what, by second quarter of next year, everybody, how do you spell tariff? That's kind of like, it's here to scare the crap out of everybody.
What's working?
And then it's going to
go.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to be.
And you know what? So you got to give them a credit. If everybody's afraid.
I'm talking about me.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll hold hands later. But at the end of the day, by mid next year,
I don't know. Let's.
I'm telling you.
I'll invite you guys back.
Yeah.
Next year
Love to come back.
Okay. We'll see how that goes.
No, it won't be news then. It's gonna. I'm telling you what.
Let's see what the economy's doing. Let's see what unemployment's doing. Let's see what inflation's doing.
Save the tape,
save
so
the
to
tape.
speak, and we can play it back and see how well we did.
Sandy Munro, let me come back to you. Ernst & Young, they don't use that name anymore. They go by EY. Came out with a study this week that said they think EV sales in the United States will hit 50% by 2039. What do you think?
Okay, so EV, that's one of those misnomers. Is it BEV?
BEV.
Is it?
No, BEV, pure battery
pure
electric.
BEV. Okay,
right.
Well, that was my prediction was 2035. I said that it would be 50-50, and that included
plug-ins and
everything, hybrids, whatever. I said by 2030, we're probably going to see a 50-50 situation where you've got pure ICE and then you've got some derivative of
some electrified. Right.
Okay, so that was for the world. Right now, I'm off because, like, you look at some of these European countries, and they're already at 60 or so % right now. And you look at Norway, I don't know if they sell gasoline anymore.
Massive subsidies. Yeah. Massive subsidies.
At the end of the day, it's not just that. Norway's electricity bill, I mean, it's like free.
I know, but look at the tax on ICE cars. It's 100%.
Look at the tax on gasoline.
Yeah, and gasoline too. So that's what I'm talking about, massive subsidies. But Sandy Bahruah, what do you think? 50% by 20?
I quoted that E&Y study earlier.
Yes, you did. Right.
And I say I think it's ambitious. I don't think we get to 50% by 39. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, are we at 35, 40%? Absolutely.
That'd be
right with a nice mix of electrification, either HEVs or PHEVs, in the mix with, obviously some kind of pure ICE, especially people who tow horses, right?
Yeah, or campers.
Well, actually, okay, so one of my guys is a horse person, and he's quite well known. His wife is, for sure. Jennifer Foreman is she's big stuff. I'm talking a Rolex, training young girls and whatnot to do whatever they do. They are now using his Lightning. Why? Oh, that'd be ridiculous. Can't possibly make that work. Well, one of the other guys that's a horse person at Munro, Ken Cutler, or sorry, not Ken Cutler, but one of the other guys.
Doesn't matter.
Anyways, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Anyways, but at the end of the day, he's been using his Lightning or actually the
What is
company's
tow a horse
Lightning,
trailer? Huh.
to tow horse trailers. And this is big stuff. I mean, you look at the Foreman's, like Dave Foreman's trailer. Holy crap! It's got everything in it, plus a couple, 3 horses or whatever.
The problem isn't can they tow it? Of course they can. I mean,
Yeah.
EVs have got
For how
way
long?
more
For how
torque.
far?
It's how far. That's the whole
and
question.
that's the thing.
Right.
So,
But
yeah.
Joe, wait, Joe, what do you think? 50% EVs in the BEVs in the U.S. by 2039.
Well, it was 14 years from now. I'm not sure I totally buy it, but I would say that I would say, I mean, I think it's going to be regional and lumpy, right? I mean, in the center of between the mountain ranges, not so much, right?
Mhm.
But on the coast where most of the people are, yeah. I mean, especially, I mean, again, thinking about this, I mean, as you see these sort of second and third, I mean, Tesla would be a third generation, I guess, but as you see these sort of second and third generation EVs with the range and the range, really kind of worked out to a point where it's not an issue, really, for most people. The charging is standardized, right? I think that's a big deal. I know you've talked about it, but when we get to like a standardized plug, when we get to and so all the stuff that's happening sort of now and isn't fully rolled out, I'm not sure I would put a whole lot of money on 50%, but I could. I think Sandy Bahruah, you said 35, 40. Yeah, I could go for that, especially in the urban areas.
You're thinking like you, right?
Yeah.
What about your kids? What about your grandchildren? That is where nobody is putting
you're right.
any stock.
No, you're right.
Well, I'm the smartest guy in the world, and I would never. Okay, but then go and talk to their kids. Now, I'm probably going to do. I've been talked out of this like about 85 times, but I'm probably going to be putting on something where I had a kid, obviously a lot smarter than I was when I was his age. I'm guessing he was like between 8 and 10, something like that. And he came up, and I was loading lumber into the back of, I had the Rivian at the time, loading lumber into it. And this kid walks up and he puts his little hand out. Do I have the pleasure of meeting Mr. Sandy Munro? I'm going, where are you from, kid? I shook his hand, and then he goes on and on. My father is such a disappointment. He just doesn't quite get the electric vehicle. My colleagues and I watch you at our lunch breaks.
Oh yeah.
Holy crap! That kid in 14 years. Tell me what he's going to be thinking.
You're right.
And that's the problem. Everybody's thinking about me.
No, I think
I thing.
Yeah, I think baby boomers and Gen X fill the windshield to a great degree when it comes to kind of market projections, and you're right. In the time frame of that EY, is probably why they made the prediction they did, right? Because they're smart enough to look around people who are filling the windshield right now. And yes, you're right. I think that's right. I mean, I think there's going to be a niche. This is very much me talking now. I mean, we have a travel trailer. We have a camper. That's what we're running around the country with a teardrop trailer. I have not seen an electric vehicle that will pull, even a relatively lightweight trailer for the distances that I think will work. So I'm out. I need a Jeep Grand Cherokee to do that.
But I would say we're on the same page in terms of the estimate, and we are EV converts.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not speaking for me, because I know that we're going to have EVs going forward. I think the X factor, Joe, is, are EVs still a political issue? Because right now, part of the depression in EV demand is politics.
Correct.
As politics is now part of it.
It's a great question. And I guess one way to look at what Trump is doing is sort of putting, maybe, and the Republicans have done, and it just puts a positive spin on it, is everybody said, or not everybody, but a lot of people would say, look, at some point EVs are going to have to stand on their own in the marketplace, sink or swim in a free market on their own. Well, guess what? That's where we're going to be. We're going to find out. Yeah. And don't you think that that at some point the industry will say, okay, this is a valid product line that has a lot of people who we want as customers who want to buy them. We better figure out how to make them profitable and competitive, right? I mean, isn't that what they're going to do?
Yeah, and quite frankly, one of the people that said, why are we taking, because I am a cheapskate, why are we taking taxpayers' money to fund something that's like kind of industrial? It's not supposed to be that way. The government is supposed to put money out to do things, but not to subsidize somebody's transportation. Not for me, unless it's like a bus or something. So here's the deal. I've been like that. Who else has said those same kind of things? Elon Musk.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'm telling you flat.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at battery packs. And let me rephrase that. We're looking at systems, a car system. And if you're around $100 a kilowatt hour, regardless of what it is, you're in the money. Well, the last couple of cars we've analyzed that get you 300 miles of range. Well, guess what? The battery systems and whatnot, they don't cost as much anymore. There's a lot more people making them. Okay, now it went back up because we couldn't get them from China. But at the end of the day, there's German guys. I don't know if you've heard, but a German Canadian company, they're mining and refining lithium right now. We've got other guys like Energy X sucking big giant salt pools in California, but even more importantly, the triangle there in Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. That's where all of these pools are. You take a ton of seawater or whatever the kind of brine water that they've got, and you get 2 kilograms of lithium. And you still have to refine it, but at the end of the day, that's a whole lot better than scraping rocks off the whatever.
Hey, look, we're going to have to wrap the show up, but I get the final word.
Oh, there you
So
go.
here's my prediction.
One quick
Go
comment.
ahead, Sandy.
The federal government back in the day, we did not subsidize the purchases of the original cars that were on the road, but we subsidized the holy heck out of the oil and gas industry.
Oh, and the highways.
And the highways, right? I mean, there was a lot of taxpayer money that went in to the oil and gas industry so they could go outside of America to bring oil and gas back into America so people could drive their cars for cheap.
So my prediction for 2039 is we're going to laugh at the idea of range anxiety. We're going to we're going to say, remember back when people were so worried? It's going to be like saying, remember back 100 years ago when people would not give up their horses because they didn't trust these newfangled things called the horseless carriage. And the other thing too is I'm not sure if it'll be 50% because I think e-revs are the next step, extended range EVs, which I think are perfect for big trucks and SUVs that are pulling trailers and hauling loads. So, but I think when the EV rebates expire in the United States at the end of this month, EV sales will go down. I don't think it's going to go to the 4% that some are quoting right now. But I think EY is probably not too far off the mark when it comes to 2039. We're going to see a lot more electric vehicles on the road.
Well, I hope we're all around to see it.
and they've gotten so attractive.
Let's hope Planet
There's so
Earth
many
is still
options
around.
out now, right? No matter what you want in an EV, it's out there for you now.
That's right. So let's wrap it up. Joe White, High Speed Rodeo, Sandy Bahruah from the Detroit Regional Chamber, and Sandy Munro. Awesome to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey.